Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is the Tuesday, January 21st, 2025 Transportation and Parking Commission meeting. My name is Donna Lascalia. I'm the Director of Public Works. I'm also the chair of this commission. This meeting is being audio and video recorded. Beth, if you could please call the roll.
DPW Director Donna Lascalia.
Here.
Police Chief John Cartledge.
Here.
Planning and Sustainability Department Carolyn Mish, Director.
Here.
Nancy Forrestall is absent today. Alex Jarrett, Councilor Alex Jarrett.
Here.
Councilor Deborah Clemmer.
Here.
Devin Bruce is also not here. Diana Foskett.
Here.
Jamie Albro Fisher.
Here.
1, 2, 3, 6. You have seven present.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Okay, next is public comment. So if you are here to address the commission on something that is not on the agenda, you are welcome to speak at this time. If you are here for discussion of our 2025 paving projects and the exceptions that are needed to complete them, I would just ask that you hold your comment until that time. So if you're here to speak to something that is not on the agenda, I just need your name and city or town of residence for the record and ask that you limit your comments to 2 minutes. Okay, first up is Stephen Good.
Hi, thank you very much. Stephen Good, Northampton. In terms of items that are not on the agenda, I just wanted to bring up the intersection redesign in front of the high school. I just wanted to ask that be on the agenda for these meetings going forward and possibly on the bike and pedestrian meetings as well, just because it's such an important intersection, especially with regard to safety. And the more transparency and citizen input we can get on that, I think the better we will all be on. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next up is Jim Nash. Jim, go ahead.
Hello, TPC. So nice to be back at the TPC. So I know I'm not supposed to comment on this because I want to speak to something else, but I think this is terrific. We're working on side streets. We're working on cul-de-sacs. We're working on dead ends. This is Director Lascalia and DPW. This is fine work. We have spent years working up to this point where we are no longer working on our main arteries. We are working on the streets that are side streets, cul-de-sacs, dead ends. That's terrific. And I want to thank you for the 4 streets that are getting done in Ward 3. The main reason I'm here is just to give everybody an update on the Pardon Our Progress POP campaign. This is a partnership between the city, the chamber, and the DNA. We are collaborating to help the city get through the anticipated redesign of downtown. And we are starting our efforts now. They will continue on right through the construction and afterwards. And we will be presenting at the Community Resources on March 17th. You'll get to hear from us where we'll be prepared with our teams, our action teams, to give everybody who's interested updates on our progress. Did I make it under 2 minutes? You didn't have to cut me off, Donna.
You did, Jim. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day.
Good to see you. Thank you. Take care. Okay, next is Hillary Gardner.
Yeah, hi, thanks for taking my question. My question is the same as the last meeting. I had reached out to PVTA and to some electeds and to the DPW about the bus on Meadow Street. I live at 56 Meadow Street in Florence between Lilly Library and Florence Fields, trying to figure out if the bus route is temporary, permanent, returning for 2025. So I'm interested in learning more about the bus route and also wanted to request that the Meadow Street Bridge over the Mill River be kept clear of ice and snow. It was left. I realize today's not the day to ask, but on the last storm, it was left pretty much impassable, and a lot of people in this neighborhood are still using Meadow Street for walking and using the fields for walking. Meadow Street, we have still having a lot of traffic issues, especially at the intersection of Park Street. We have folks skipping over the island that was constructed to turn into Lilly Library off Park Street, and they're turning into traffic coming up Meadow Street. So just a lot of confusing traffic patterns. But thank you again for the speed humps. And I wanted to say thank you especially to the police chief for the chat and chew opportunities to speak in the community. There were a lot of people addressing speeding and traffic issues, which we're still seeing on Meadow Street. So thank you again for that opportunity. And it would be great to get the speeds reduced in town. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. Next is Danny.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I was just wanting to comment that regarding sort of the Elm Street project at the high school and also kind of any other significant redesign projects that are in process, it would be helpful if there was like some sort of brief update, even if it's like not a major agenda item, at each of these meetings and at Bike Ped. You know, I heard a rumor that maybe at a PTO meeting, it was said that the project schedule has changed. And so I don't know, I wasn't at the PTO meeting, but if that information was somewhere quickly summarized for us here or on the city website, it would just be helpful to, know that information and have it be public. And then just generally on the Elm Street redesign, I think there's a lot of citizens that would like to see a design that really slows the cars because slower car traffic is less deadly. And hoping that the city will consider protected, perhaps even like a raised bike path combined with the sidewalk or next to a sidewalk at that location. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment. Next is Chris.
I'm sorry, my computer was just blinking out on me. My comment is inspired by something that was said at the city council meeting last week, where a resident sort of pushed the widespread but deeply mistaken belief that bicycle safety comes from staying out of the way of cars. In reality, our crash records show that drivers do not hit bicyclists who are in the way. They hit bicyclists they never saw. And primarily in the Pioneer Valley, they hit it and kill us in the intersections. Most of Northampton's 160 miles of narrow, curvy roads are de facto shared lanes, whether they're marked that way or not. And Massachusetts passing law requires that their drivers leave 4 feet of clearance, which really does not exist in many of these roads without crossing the center line. So it's great that we're actually explicitly marking shared lane markings on places like Pleasant Street downtown or Meadow Street in Florence. But much like seatbelts, shared lane markings don't work unless they're used. And we need to show bicyclists that you actually need to be riding in the middle of those chevrons where you're safely visible and not over the edge where you're inviting illegal passing. Pleasant Street is stop and go, so there's rarely a reason to pass a bike. But Meadow Street is a full half mile signed at 35 miles an hour, and people actually drive that. That as a matter of policy is a double yellow because by policy we don't want cars passing cars, but absolutely cars are going to have to pass bikes on that half mile. I mean, having someone breathing down your neck when you're going only 12 miles an hour is just very, very stressful. So we need to make it clear to drivers that not only does Massachusetts 4-foot clearance law require that they cross the center line. It also allows them to do so, of course, only when it's safe to do so. And so we really need to clarify that there, because the reality is getting around Northampton by bike really only works to the degree that our bicyclists and drivers understand how to intersect safely. Also, just want to mention that there's a widespread public interest in protected bike lanes under the idea that they're going to like duplicate the rail trail experience. But that's very dangerously misleading, because the rail trail is safe because its intersections are simple and cars cannot make the turning movements that are causing the majority of our crashes.
Hi, just to let you know, it's at 2 minutes, so we just wanted
Okay,
to.
last sentence. A protected bike lane really is nothing like the rail trail experience. It really duplicates the dangers of riding on a sidewalk, and it's just a gauntlet of intersection death traps. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments, Chris. Next is Terry Reynolds.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Go ahead, Terry.
Okay. I might be speaking out of order. I just wanted to speak to the agenda item and the sidewalks. Am I
Yeah, if
too
you
soon
could,
for that?
if you wouldn't mind just holding your comment until we get there,
Sure.
we'll
Okay.
recognize you at that time. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to us on something that is not on the agenda? Okay, hearing and seeing nothing, we'll move on to approval of the minutes from the prior meeting, which is December 17th of 2024. May I have a motion for approval of those minutes, please?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, that's Jamie. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Counselor Jarrett. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Okay, hearing none. Beth, please call the roll.
Donna,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Carolyn,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Deborah,
Yes.
Diana,
Yes.
Jamie.
Yes.
It's unanimous with 7.
Okay, thank you. Next is reports from departments and subcommittees and announcement. I just have one update from DPW, and it is about the high school project. So Carolyn and I attended a PTO meeting last week to have a conversation with parents about the proposed alterations to Elm Street and to solicit feedback, particularly about traffic flow in the parking lot and kind of thoughts on where students can be picked up and dropped off. Got some good feedback there. We've had a couple of meetings with our design engineer, Fuss and O'Neill, and taken back a lot of the comments that we've received from the various people who've taken the time to email us. Some people have taken the rendering that we have posted on our website and marked it up with questions and comments. We've received a lot of emails, just sort of commentary, really community-wide. There is a rendering of the project posted in the high school. I did an interview with the student leader of the kind of the, I guess it's their YouTube channel. So the mayor and I were interviewed to talk about the project. So we're really getting a lot of good comments and feedback from the community on this. And we have taken a lot of those comments and brought them back to our design firm to work through things like, can we do separated bike lanes? What might those look like? What does the maintenance look like? And is the maintenance affordable long-term? And will they have the desired effect? That's just one example. We're also working through a water main break in the intersection of Milton and Riverside Drive. That is potentially problematic for our water main in the area. That is still leaking. We have it sectionalized and shut off right now, but that will have to be repaired. as soon as the weather is a little bit more favorable. The project has not been delayed. I'm not sure where that came from. We intend to bid the project this year, and we continue to try to work through some of the details around the project, and it will be discussed at City Council again tomorrow night, because City Council needs to appropriate the funding for the project. So that's an update on the high school and all of the actions that we are taking. And again, we'll continue to have discussions at this commission and its subcommittees, and likely with the PTO again, once we have anything substantive to report. I will also mention that we have a FAQ page on our website that folks may want to consult that has a lot of answers to questions that we see sort of over and over again. That's all my updates. I don't know if Carolyn has anything or if anyone else has anything.
Yeah, sure. I'll just note, I think I mentioned at the last meeting that the bids for the Rocky Hill Greenway shared use path construction were going out December 14th. They went out. There were 12 responsive bidders for that project, which is great. A really good showing for that bid. The bids closed. MassDOT's in the process of making a selection. But that just goes to, I think, the fact that there were so many, there was so much active bidding on that because it went out early. So it went out in December. So again, sort of the timeline of trying to get bids out in December, January, February are really important in order to get competitive and lots of response. But at any rate, what that means is MassDOT will be selecting the contractor to begin work this spring.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. Anyone else have any updates for us? Okay, seeing and hearing none, next we'll move to matters before the commission. So this agenda item is for the discussion of the 2025 paving projects. We have a streets list that was announced by Mayor Chiara at council. So these are all of the streets that we intend to pave this year. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about our complete streets policy and ask the commission to vote on design exceptions for places that we cannot install sidewalks as required by the complete streets policy. So Maggie, if you wouldn't mind just going back to the streets list for a moment. So these streets, as Jim Nash mentioned in public comment, represent a shift for us in that we have completed work on a lot of our main arterials and main feeder streets, and we are now moving into the neighborhoods in a way that we haven't in many, many years. The streets on this list have not had attention since the 1950s or 1960s. Our intention is to do a mill and overlay, which is a very, very basic treatment. You mill off the top 3 or 4 inches and you replace it with a fresh coat of asphalt. These streets have not been identified as streets that need major utility work, with the exception of Terrace Lane, which I'll talk about in a moment. But in general, when you need to do major utility work, you have to do what's called the reclaim, which requires really significant digging and reconstruction. So these streets are just a very basic mill and overlay, 3 inches down, new asphalt. And so Terrace Lane is the only street that needs a new water main. We've had several water main breaks on that street. It's a dead-end street off of Hatfield. So we've had several water main breaks there over the last year that have negatively impacted the neighborhood. So this is much like our Winter Street project that folks might remember from last summer. So we need to address the water main, and once that's complete, we will be repaving the roadway. So Maggie, if you wouldn't mind now moving on to the complete streets ordinance. So this is the complete streets policy or ordinance. It is in our code of ordinances. It was implemented in 2015. And this is consistent with the state's requirements around complete streets. And this is a guideline for how we are to design all of our roadway reconstruction projects, including mill and overlay. The sections of this policy which have become particularly problematic for us as we deal with deferred maintenance on our 160 miles of roadway and our many miles of sidewalk is compliance with A11 specifically and B1. And the requirements are concrete sidewalks on both sides of the street in particular zones of the city. And they're all written out. I won't read the ordinance. But if you were to overlay the zones onto a map of the city, what you would find is that the ordinance actually requires concrete sidewalks on both sides of just about every street in the city until and unless you get way out into kind of the outer edges of Ward 6 and Ward 7, because most streets in the city have proximity to a school or to a downtown business district. So what we find is that our roadway reconstruction starts to become prohibitively expensive because many streets don't have sidewalks at all, much less space for sidewalks on both sides of the street. So we walk this fine line between compliance with this ordinance, designing safe streets, and then addressing the miles and miles and miles of streets that are just in straight up disrepair. And I think that anyone who looks at the list of streets that we're proposing to pave, anyone who travels these streets or lives on these streets, would readily agree that the streets are in disrepair and need to be paved. So our challenge is compliance with this ordinance, addressing the deferred maintenance and using the funding that we have in a responsible way and not making perfection the enemy of the good. Carolyn and I have been making the rounds. We've been to the Disability Commission. We've been talking a little bit in the Bike and Ped Subcommittee about making some alterations to this ordinance that tweaks it in a way that's a little bit easier for us to work with, because again, the requirements for concrete sidewalks on both sides of every street create a scenario where you would be spending huge amounts of money on maybe a small side street. And when you're done, yes, you have sidewalks on both sides of that street, but it is to the detriment of other streets throughout the city. So we're trying to strike a balance between affordability, walkability, safety, understanding that we're working with limited resources. So what we have done is we have put together a design exception presentation. And what I'm going to ask the commission to do this afternoon is to vote on these proposed design exceptions. According to the ordinance, the TPC by ordinance has to approve all exceptions to this policy. And what I will do is go street by street and say what the policy requires, and then say what we're able to reasonably do with the funding and the time and the project schedule that we have. And then I have to request that TPC vote per ordinance. What I will also add is I would like to address kind of some of the community-wide comments that we hear about sort of public input in this process and timing, and why don't we release our list of paving projects sooner. And to just talk a little bit about the process, many municipalities do not have in-house engineering staff. And they actually contract everything out to a third party who does all of their roadway design and then puts everything out to bid and then sort of manages it. And there is a really significant expense associated with that. We pride ourselves in Northampton on having very competent and capable in-house engineering staff, in particular Maggie Chan, who staffs this commission, who does a huge amount of work on all of our roadway projects. And it is because of our in-house capabilities with engineers like Maggie, that we are actually able to do as much work as we do. If we were to contract this out to a third party, the price of engineering raises dramatically and does not allow us to do as much work as we would otherwise do. With that being said, we are managing work that's ongoing, and we are developing projects to be ongoing next summer. So a typical schedule is that we generate all of our plans this time of year. We need to go to bid end of February, early March, because we are competing with for resources with every other municipality in the region that's trying to pave at the same time we're trying to pave. And then we actually have to oversee those projects. So our in-house engineering staff is overseeing all of those projects that have been designed over the winter, over the summer. Those projects actually don't wind down until November or December, and then we have to design everything that we're doing again for the next construction season, and the whole process starts again. So a lot of people say, well, you know, why don't you release this list sooner? And the answer to that is the capacity we have is finite. And when we think about what are our resources for paving, what is our staff capacity, what is our financial capacity, the best way that we can spend the city's money and get the absolute most bang for our buck, pave as many streets and sidewalks as possible, to work with our in-house engineers and then push to have this really rapid turnaround. So we are in this place right now of really fast turnaround for engineering plans for next winter's work, for next summer's work. Now, interestingly, even though it's January, we're still working on finalizing details of, for example, the bike path paving and the paving projects that we just did last summer. We haven't even paid final invoices on that. We haven't worked through punch list items. So it's a constant cycle of projects that are in various stages of development and various stages of completion. If we were to take this and outsource it, what you would find is that our lane miles of paving would dramatically decrease, because now we have a third-party engineering firm involved who we have to pay to manage that process. So that's just a little bit of commentary on why kind of everything seems like we're in a compressed time schedule. And it's because we actually are in a compressed time schedule, but we're trying to get as much work as possible done as we possibly can with the money we have. So I will also mention a street that was not on that list of streets that we intend to pave is Florence Street. I will be back likely at the next meeting asking for a design exception for Florence Street. Those plans are still in development, but we are planning to pave Florence Street all the way from Route 9 down to the center of Leeds, so past where the bike path crosses. And down towards the post office area, the big main intersection with Main Street. So this is a very aggressive paving list and paving schedule. We're looking at several $1 million worth of streets and sidewalks. And this funding is on the agenda at City Council tomorrow night for those who may be on that meeting. So next I'll ask Maggie to get to the design exception portion of this presentation. So what we've done is we've gone street by street and we sent this out ahead of time, and just for folks to sort of take a look at. I'm not gonna read what's there or belabor any of these points. But for each one of these streets, we are having difficulty complying with the ordinance. And I want to make it clear that when we talk about compliance with the ordinance, anything is possible. If we have enough time and we have enough money, we can actually do anything. The point of this conversation is to say, what can we do that makes the biggest public benefit and the best impact for all users of the roadway and keep it affordable? So let's just start with Crescent Street. So the ordinance, in this case, requires concrete sidewalks on both sides of the street, because of the zoning around this street. If you look at the picture, what we've tried to do is sort of select pictures that just highlight the challenges. Options here are we could remove the tree, we could relocate the fire hydrant, we could cut in a retaining wall, and we could install a sidewalk. The time and the money associated with that would be prohibitive. And 3 years from now, the street would be on a list to be paved. And, if we got that financial appropriation, we could start thinking about paving Crescent Street. So these are the challenges around compliance with the ordinance. So I think everyone sort of, hears what the ordinance requires and kind of the point of the presentation. Councillor Jarrett, go ahead.
Thanks. Just a clarifying question. So in this document, you will be redoing the sidewalk, the asphalt sidewalk that exists, and if it does already exist.
That's correct. And what I'll do is I'll go street by street and I'll say what we plan to do, because it's a little bit different for each street. But yes, in general, if there's already a sidewalk there, we intend to redo the sidewalk. So
Okay.
I will actually say that for each street that we go through, I'll make that point. So I'd like to just quickly run through this presentation, and then I will open it up for comments and questions. But for members of the commission, please feel free to interrupt me at any time if you need some clarification.
I just had another question about, it says does not meet complete streets policy requirement of concrete sidewalks on both sides in urban residential district. You're saying the ordinance does not apply, or you're looking for an exception because this is an urban residential district, right?
Yes, correct. And so it currently does not meet that requirement. And after our
I see.
proposed work, it
Mhm.
will not meet that requirement.
Got it. Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, thank you, Counselor. So if we start with Crescent Street, the ordinance requires concrete sidewalks on both sides of this street. We are proposing that the asphalt sidewalk that exists be reconstructed as asphalt. So that is the exception that we are requesting on this street. And what I would suggest is when we move to vote on this, I would like to move them as a package. So we just take one vote and we vote on all of them. So I'll just sort of throw that out there now, but there's not a motion on the floor at this point. So I'll just run through the presentation. Okay, next is Langworthy Road. So right now there are no existing sidewalks, and concrete sidewalks are required by ordinance on both sides of this street. We do not plan to install sidewalks. And again, sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. And we've tried to select pictures that show the challenges around compliance with this ordinance. Next slide, please. Maggie.
Can I ask a question?
Yep, go ahead, Jamie.
So on Crescent, the exception would be no concrete sidewalk on that left side, but also not installing a sidewalk on the right side at all.
Correct. So what the ordinance is requiring is concrete on both sides.
Right. And same for Langworthy, you're going for just no sidewalk at all because it's a dead end street.
It's a dead end street, and the topography is very challenging there.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so next we have Hillside Road. On this road, the complete streets policy would require concrete sidewalks to be installed on both sides. So the exception that we are looking for here is no concrete. We will reconstruct the existing asphalt sidewalk on one side of the road. And again, if you look at the picture on the right-hand side of that road, it would be nearly impossible for us to cut a sidewalk in there. It would require a retaining wall, relocation of utility poles. So this is what we find. The right of way is, it can be very steep, and it can also be crowded with things like utility poles or drainage. Next is Kingsley Avenue, bottom of the page. So this requires concrete sidewalks again on both sides of the road. And what we are proposing is that the existing asphalt is reconstructed and there is no installation on the other side of the road. And again, you can see utility pole sort of smack in the middle. Next is Randolph Place, another dead-end street. So this requires concrete sidewalks on both sides of the road again, which is a common theme. So we are proposing to replace the concrete sidewalk on one side of the road here. So we're not asking for an exception to asphalt. We will use concrete in this case because we're right downtown, but it will only be on one side of the road. Next is Northern Avenue, same thing, concrete sidewalks required on both sides. We are proposing that we reconstruct the asphalt on one side. Next is Woodbine Avenue. So Woodbine Avenue requires concrete sidewalks on both sides per the ordinance. So we are proposing to reconstruct the sidewalk on both sides, but it will be asphalt. So the exception that we need here is a material exception. And I also should have added in my remarks, the price of concrete is roughly 3 times the size of asphalt, 3 times the price of asphalt. So when we think about our budgets, we can do about its third as many sidewalks if we were to do everything in concrete as we could if we do everything in asphalt.
And what about the durability though? Like, does concrete last a lot longer? Is that why it was proposed to begin with?
Yeah, concrete is more typical in urban settings, and it does have a longer life expectancy than asphalt does. You know, asphalt does have a tendency to crack in a way that concrete does not. But I will also mention, you know, for those that have ever seen, you know, new concrete and then people throw like salt on it, you know, to melt the snow and it sort of pocks. You know, and it can actually delaminate. So it is a little bit of a double-edged sword. You know, if treated properly, concrete can have a really, you know, good long life. If you don't treat it properly, it can really delaminate quickly on you. But, you know, we would expect a concrete sidewalk, or I'm sorry, an asphalt sidewalk to last 20, 25 years easily. You know, concrete just lasts an order of magnitude a little bit longer than that. But, you know, that's the investment, you know, to pay sort of 2/3 more. Okay, so Carpenter Avenue. So again, concrete sidewalks on both sides. We are proposing to reconstruct the existing asphalt sidewalk just on one side. So we need both a materials and a 2-side of the street exception here. Next is Summer.
Sorry,
Yes.
Director, could I just ask about Carpenter? It mentions it's not a through street, meaning some of it's a private street. How much of it is a public street? How much of that will be redone?
So the only thing that we're legally allowed to spend city resources on is public right of way. So what we will do is part of our bid documents, we have survey on this. And we will halt everything right at the line of demarcation. If there is private property, we do not move on to private property.
Right, I was just curious which part of it is private, because it's not clear. Going down it, it appears it goes right from Finn to King Street.
That I can't answer, but I can't answer it now, but I can let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so next is Summer Street, I believe, if we move to the next page here. So Summer Street, So again, this requires concrete sidewalks on both sides of the street. And we are proposing to just reconstruct what's existing, and that will be asphalt. So we're looking for both material and side of the street exceptions. Maplewood Terrace, no existing sidewalks, and we are not proposing any sidewalks. And again, these are sort of tough decisions when we have a street that has no sidewalks. We would love to put sidewalks in. If you look at this street, we've got really significant sloping and we have utility poles. So we're sort of hemmed in, and we can't narrow the road enough to impose a sidewalk on here. So, you know, these are the sort of things that we grapple with, because if we were to say, well, let's see if we can drop a sidewalk in, now we have to rework all of the drainage, which takes the project and turns it into something that is no longer a mill and overlay. Now it's actually a reclaim with significant drainage work. And this is how things sort of get put on the back burner and they become less and less affordable. And kind of the days tick off the calendar, and then the street doesn't get paved, because we're sort of moving in a different, more less affordable direction. Okay, next is Sheffield Lane. So Sheffield Lane has no existing sidewalks, and we are not proposing any existing sidewalks. The Complete Streets policy does require concrete sidewalks on both sides of this street. So again, looking at a scenario where we've got the heavy sloping on both sides of the road, sloping on the road itself, and that you would need a very, very significant project to superimpose sidewalks on this topography and then rework all of the drainage. Next is Stilson Avenue. Policy requires concrete sidewalks on both sides, and we are proposing to just reinstate or reconstruct rather the asphalt that is already there on one side. So both material and side of the street exceptions. Okay, sorry, this is a long list, just bear with me here. But I will mention one of our more aggressive paving initiatives in the years, in many years, probably for as long as most people on this call can remember. Hillcrest Drive. Again, concrete sidewalks on both sides are required, and we are proposing no sidewalks. We have drainage considerations here. We have streetlights, and we have sloping that would be very difficult to work with. Country Way, we have slopes and trees, concrete sidewalk. And a concrete sidewalk is required, and we are proposing no sidewalks on this street for, again, similar reasons. So, you know, as I kind of go through this list, again, I'm sort of apologetic around, you know, while we're proposing no sidewalks, but I think everyone can sort of hear the reasons why this is difficult. Next is Morningside Drive. We have pretty significant sloping on both sides of the road. So again, we're within 1 mile of the school, and no sidewalks are proposed here. Jewett Street, we do have existing sidewalks on both sides of the street. They are asphalt, and we intend to reconstruct both of them as asphalt, but the policy requests that they are concrete. So we are looking for a material exception on Jewett Street. Next is Belmont Avenue. Belmont Avenue requires concrete sidewalks on both sides, and we are proposing that the existing asphalt, be reconstructed. Winterberry Lane, as the notes under the picture state, this is a dead-end street, and we are proposing no sidewalk in this area. What you what is a little bit difficult to see here is that this is what we call country drainage. So we don't have formal drains in this area. We have a series of swales, and we're using the pervious area to actually capture runoff. So if we were to sort of dig into those spaces on either the left or the right, that would actually impact the drainage, and we would have to consider installing some sort of formal drainage system in this area. Next is Birch Lane. So again, dead end street, needs to have a sidewalk, and we are proposing no sidewalk on this street. If you look, and this is actually a pretty good picture on the left-hand side, that is actually a drainage structure, and that whole side of the street is actually a drainage swale. Next is Church Street. Pretty obvious from the picture. We just have insufficient right-of-way here. There's just simply not enough space. This street also, per policy, needs to have a sidewalk, and we are not proposing any sidewalks on this street. Next is Perkins Avenue. So what we are proposing is a reconstruction of the asphalt sidewalk on both sides of the street. The ordinance requires concrete on both sides of the street. So this is a materials exception. And finally, Terrace Lane, this is the street with the water main problem. So it does not currently have existing sidewalks, and the policy requires concrete sidewalks on both sides. We are not proposing the installation of any sidewalks here. So that concludes the PowerPoint presentation. Thank you so much for bearing with me. And now I'm happy to open it up to first comments from the commission, if there are any clarifying questions, and then I will open it up to the public. So Carolyn, go ahead.
Thanks, Donna. Yeah, I think you're right. These pictures are very good at showing what the conditions are. I'm wondering for two of the streets, Hillcrest first, is very wide. It was sort of, you know, built when we were landing aircraft carrier type equipment onto streets. And I'm wondering if it makes sense in lieu of sidewalks, if there was some painting to narrow sort of the drive lanes to help both slow traffic, but also identify where pedestrians and cyclists could be safely and cars shouldn't be. And a similar comment, that's a 30-foot wide street, I think, and the same with Winterberry. It's about a third of a mile long. So I'm wondering if this a similar treatment could be looked at for those, so that you get some traffic calming and complete streets elements, even if they can't be sidewalks.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and those are good points. And to answer your question, yes, I mean, as part of the plans that we generate, to the extent we can stripe this in a way that makes people more comfortable, we will absolutely do that. So thank you. Councilor Jarrett, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Director Mish, for the that point. I was going to speak to that too on Hillcrest Drive. So is there any, because street narrowing, either the DPW has to pave and maintain this entire width. And if it's not necessary, if there's a way to decrease its width, then there's potential cost savings in the future. But so are there, I understand the drainage concerns would be primarily what would be difficult in narrowing. But could rain gardens be used in some way to use the existing drainage, but to effectively narrow the street and perhaps, you know, create areas where trees could be planted, even if ultimately a sidewalk would not work, could that narrowing and additional green space be provided, and also the rain gardens would help absorb some of the runoff before it hits the drainage system.
Yeah, and I think, you know, for some of these wider streets, that's something we can look at. The challenges for us are that in general, our utilities are right on the gutter line. So we have water, we have sewer, and we have drainage. So we have to be careful what we're building over those. And we also have to be careful where we're planting trees. We try to avoid planting trees near sewer lines, for example, because, you know, they infiltrate the joints in the sewer. So, really one of our biggest challenges is the roadway drainage, and trying to manage that sheet flow. And anytime we're making an alteration, to the curb line or sort of putting green space where it wasn't, it's something we have to look very carefully at. So as part of the development of these plans, to the extent that we can avoid asphalting a 30-foot wide strip, we will, but sometimes it is simply unavoidable, just because of utility considerations.
Mm-hmm. And Perkins, you said there's a concrete on one side and asphalt on the other. Is that concrete going to be maintained on one side, or you're proposing to do asphalt on both? Sorry if I missed that.
Let me just get back here. We're proposing asphalt on both sides, because otherwise it wouldn't look right.
Okay, just that the reason is because of how it would look, or
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't, I mean, we're sort of digging it all up and starting over, so we wouldn't want to put like asphalt on one side and a concrete on the other. It's either concrete on both sides or asphalt on both sides. From a cost savings, it's not like we're patching the concrete sidewalk, for example. All of it's coming up, all of it's being relayed, and the proposal is asphalt on both sides because it is less expensive than concrete on one side and asphalt on the other.
okay, thank
that
you for
makes
that
sense.
explanation.
Yeah, Councilor Clemmer, go ahead.
Yeah, just the last comment made me think of a question. So when you replace the asphalt, so you're just gonna dig up everything and then just do the asphalt strip and then the street? So you have to dig up the asphalt and start from scratch basically and put it in, and then instead of just redoing it?
Yeah, we can't patch, right, we can't patch what's there. So we peel it all back, and then part of what we have to do is assess where there are trees. Where there are trees, we actually put in structural soil and then porous pavement around the trees. Because if we just relay asphalt right by the tree, within 5 years, that asphalt sidewalk is going to be all heaved again. So part of the expense of this project, really, whether you use concrete or asphalt, is we have to work around all of the trees and we have to make accommodation for all of the trees. And the price of that is actually really significant. So there has to be an analysis of every street. How many trees are there? Where is it relative to the sidewalk? And then an accommodation for both structural soil. So we actually have to excavate around the tree, kind of air spade that, prune the roots if it needs it, replace the soil, and then put porous pavement on top of that so that the tree roots don't actually heave the asphalt sidewalk. But that would be our process.
Oh, wow, okay, so it's pretty extensive. I thought you're just gonna put some stuff on the asphalt, so. And then I'm just want to thank you for doing this. I know, Crescent Street and Perkins Street, Jewett Street in particular are thrilled about this. And I just think it makes a lot of sense to fix these 4.5 miles of roadways in the area. And it just makes sense, and I'll be supporting this.
Thank you, Councilor. Okay, any other comments from anyone on the commission or clarifying questions before I open it up for public comment? Okay, seeing none, Stephen Good is first.
Thank you. Stephen Good, Northampton. A lot of these streets are in my neighborhood, and I can attest to both their condition and to your logic of not overbuilding them when you redo them, and the impossibility of trying to accommodate concrete sidewalks on both sides in many cases. So a lot of this makes a lot of sense to me. The one question I had was in terms of updating the ordinance in order to avoid having to seek all of these individual exceptions each time. I saw on the city website there's a 2017 document, Complete Streets Design Manual, that discusses, among other things, what they call a local shared roadway, which is, you know, a low traffic volume, low speed, narrow roadway with no sidewalks or bike lanes or anything, just, you know, asphalt for motor vehicles and bikes and pedestrians. And it seems like there are a number of streets in this list of streets, including the ones that have no sidewalks now, or some that have only one sidewalk. Carpenter, I think you said, has one sidewalk, but it's minimal and in terrible condition, that sort of thing. Has there been any thought in terms of updating the ordinance into codifying something like a local shared roadway as an option for streets like this? Thank you.
Thank you. And I think it's probably easier for me to respond sort of comment by comment here. The answer is yes. Carolyn and I are actually actively working on potential proposed revisions to this ordinance. And that would be an example of one of the revisions. So as we sort of continue our movement through the Disability Commission and Bike and Ped Subcommittee, before those revisions come to this commission, as well as City Council, who would ultimately have to vote them, I think we need some more public input on this and ideas around it. Carolyn, I don't know if you have any further comments about that, but it's certainly well taken.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think just what you said, we're still working on the language so that it's more specific to address concerns that were raised previously, and also just to, you know, identify the types of situations in which these cases should be considered.
Okay. Thanks, Carolyn. Okay, next is Alex Bowman.
Hi, Alex Bowman, Northampton. You know, it's great to see some of these roads getting repaved for the first time in half a century. You know, it's a once in a generation opportunity to make some changes. And most roads like these, they don't need, or most of these roads, they don't need speeds more than 25 miles per hour. So it makes sense that you don't necessarily need a sidewalk on both sides. So roads can be safe for pedestrians. You know, walking on the road, as Stephen just said, is often an option, but they need design elements to make sure that the cars know that they're entering a zone where there may be people on the street. You know, a car moving at 15 miles per hour is a lot different than a car moving at 30 miles per hour. And a lot of these streets, you know, they're wide, and there's nothing on them, even in these, so it makes it easy for those cars to move fast. You know, the ordinance says that even at remilling operation, there should be incorporation of traffic calming measures, accessibility improvements, and bicycle and pedestrian facilities. So I know we don't necessarily need dedicated bicycle and pedestrian facilities here, but there are traffic calming measures like maximum entrance widths, corner radiuses, and raised crossings when you're going into one of these dead end streets that would really be really helpful at, you know, setting the tone for the neighborhood. And it would be great to be able to incorporate some of those that are in the Complete Streets design guide. And I was just wondering if there's any plan to incorporate those traffic calming measures that are in the design guide, and if not, why not? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. And the answer is yes. And what we do is anytime we do a project like this, to the extent we can narrow without negatively impacting our drainage and sort of turning it into something bigger, we take that opportunity. So what we do is we generate plan sheets for each street. And, you know, to the extent that we can stripe a crosswalk, put up signage, you know, shrink an entrance, you know, we absolutely do that as part of our design process. So the answer is yes. Sorry, you have one more thing for us?
Yeah, so I was just wondering, like, how is the TPC able to vote on saying, yeah, we're okay with not having the sidewalks without understanding the full design of that?
Yep, and that's a very legitimate point, and the answer is it's not possible from a timing standpoint. So we have to generate the plans, which are in development right now, to sort of bring them back as a public process, implement further delay, and we can't get the project out to bid. I mean, we have very strict standards that we have to design to. We can't just go like pave a road and not do something because we don't want to, or we're too lazy to. So I mean, we do have a standard to which we have to design, but in terms of TPC actually voting on that element, that's not something that TPC has historically voted on, and that's not something that I'm requesting a vote on in the future. I mean, we need an exception to this ordinance in order to keep the project moving. And I hear what you're saying, but it's very difficult for us to have fully developed plans in time for this to get out to bid. Okay, next is Terry Reynolds. Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that we're getting to these streets. It's been a long time coming. I was wondering, in terms of, you're saying this is just surface treatments for the streets, and specifically Maplewood Terrace. Maplewood Terrace has some serious drainage issues. Currently, the drainage does not really go into the structures. It bypasses most of the structures. So I'm just wondering what kind of improvements you're thinking in terms of the drainage and possibly shoulder work to ensure that it's actually getting in there.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. One of the things that we look at with every street is, what can we do with curbing to sort of, move the sheet flow where we want it to go. We also look at, grades. Can we sort of push this towards, pervious area rather than impervious area? Sometimes in a project like this, again, we're not doing a full reclaim. We're not doing, full heavy infrastructure work. We're just trying to get the surface of the road in passable condition. So to the extent that we can address this by, looking at potential elevations of catch basins, or what we can do with curbing or some other sort of basic stormwater piece, that's what we'll do as part of these plans. But a more significant reclaim, more significant drainage work would take, more time, and you'd have to sort of travel on the road as it is now while we were trying to work through that.
Yeah. The reason I'm bringing it up is when Hinckley was reconstructed, basically that drainage goes to the east. And basically everything coming off of Maplewood Terrace goes down and has to take a hard turn and go the opposite way. And the way it currently goes is it bypasses all the structures and ends up going into the old drainage system that's a low point to the north of the end of Maplewood Terrace. And so basically all the drainage coming off the hill, which is quite significant, is going there, and that system is slowly failing. And it goes across, I think, 4 private properties, and it consistently gets overloaded with sediment and debris. So I think it's really important to consider trying to either get curb inlets on there or do something much more significant than just resetting.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. I appreciate your comment. And my other comment on Hinckley would be, that was a larger project to try to relieve some of kind of the larger network. And, there's a lot of sort of historic overloading of the systems in that area. One of the things that I think is really important to Mayor Chiara is addressing just these roadway conditions. And if you're looking at the ability to kind of take a limited amount of funding and resurface this street and improve conditions for everyone who uses this road, I think that's an important step to take while we look at the larger issues. But your comments on drainage are certainly well taken. I hear you loud and clear. Next is Danny. Go ahead.
Hello. Hi, sorry. So obviously, with regard to streets that can't meet the complete street standard, it sounds like improvement is and should be the standard anyways. And it would be, I think, helpful to maybe have some like designs that show what improvement is if you can't meet the standard. And maybe that's even sort of a way that the TPC and the public could be involved in sort of like approving or having comment on what those design standards could be, so that you don't necessarily need the input when you're in a big rush. Like maybe the TPC could approve some design exemptions, that are guidelines, that kind of thing ahead of time. So it's not at a bad time in the process, or just kind of like going through, there's obviously a lot of people who are wanting input into the process and maybe can't get it because of the way the timelines are lining up. So I'm just trying to kind of think out of the box about ways that the TPC, who are sitting here because they want to be involved, and also, the community can have input without screwing your processes up too much. I also want to quickly say that I'm definitely in favor of a shared street standard, and I think a lot of people are. We've had a lot of conversations offline about this in the community of people who are into bicycle and pedestrian safety and just better transportation networks. And if there's, even taking that a step further and saying, well, is there some way, process, or procedure for identifying streets that are so low traffic that the existing sidewalks should in fact be taken offline and no longer maintained in favor of a shared street standard for that street? I think that could have a lot of benefits all around if the city could adopt something and sort of start a proactive process on very low traffic streets for, abandoning sidewalks.
Yep, thanks for those comments. And what I'd like to do is be back to this commission in a few months for conversation around this ordinance and how we might make some tweaks to it that will make some sense. Next is Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. I also really like the idea of shared streets. We just had a snowstorm that reminds that we plow public space with public money, but leave the sidewalks to, varied efforts. I will say some of the subdivisions with a homeowners association seem to do it all at once, which, though HOAs are typically icky, that is one good thing about them. And I noticed that some of these streets like Winterberry and Birch do not appear to have an HOA the way that some others do. I am concerned that I think we really need public input, not only when we're not going to meet the design standards, but even where we do think we could possibly fit in a sidewalk. Is that actually a benefit? I live on a beautiful 30-foot wide street. It's a wonderful place to walk or bike in the street. Adults do it, kids do it. It's very calm, it's spacious, there's no conflict. I can be walking along and suddenly I come to a newer section and now there's a sidewalk on the other side. And by law, I can't continue where I am. I have to cross the street and use the sidewalk, even though there's really no difference in conditions. So I would really like to see us look at the character of a street, talk to the people who live there, and even ask, is there a behavior problem with cars? You look at my street from not living here and you'd think people would drive like maniacs, but actually we have a 50-year tradition of walking in the street and drivers expect people there and it works out fine. So, the idea that to create a people first street, we have to squeeze it and narrow it. That's not always the case. I can go from a very relaxed street and cross Bird's Pit and be on Cardinal Way, which is narrow, curvy, modern thinking, and it's a nightmare on a bike. Because it's curvy with no sight lines. It's not realistic that a driver is going to follow me at 12 miles an hour the full distance, but I never know if they're going to go for it on a blind curve. Also, the minute somebody's lawn care truck or party guest parks in the road, it gets very treacherous to bike or drive.
I'm sorry, you're at 2 minutes again. Sorry.
And you know, even if we were just going to stripe a bike lane, that technically makes parking on these streets illegal. I'm looking at Street View right now, and a lot of people are parked on like Hillcrest. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Next is Phil.
Thank you. Sorry for that delay. So I just want to really thank you because we've lived on the street for 30 years, and the covering of the potholes is kind of now a mosaic tapestry of beautiful different blacks. And it's really great to hear that resources are available for the DPW to go ahead and reach our street and other streets. And we're actually pleased there will not be sidewalks because the street is on the narrow side. And as Chris was saying previously about his street, people walk on our street all the time. And there is a beautiful tradition of not many cars and lots of people. So my internal organs, thank you. And thank you once again.
Okay, thank you. Next is Hillary. Go ahead, Hillary.
Yeah, hi. You might have addressed this already, but I had a question. As part of the repaving, will the vegetation that's encroaching on sidewalks and the road and gutter as well have to be removed? Because as I try to walk around Florence Center, it's never clear to me. There seems to be no enforcement of that. There's definitely vegetation, shrubbery, and low tree branches on North Main Street, Corticelli. So do you require the homeowners then to be in compliance with keeping the sidewalks and streets clear as part of the repaving? And that would be very helpful, making Northampton more pedestrian friendly. Thank you.
Thanks, Hillary. As part of our paving process, we send notices to all abutters. A lot of people plant things in the right of way, or they have, bushes hanging into the right of way. We notify them that they can either remove those things or we remove those things for them as part of the reconstruction. In terms of enforcement of that, it's one of the more vexing tasks that faces DPW is enforcement of this. It's very, very difficult to sort of police this throughout the city, but we do work with the city's ADA coordinator. We work with the ward counselor to sort of convince people to comply with the ordinance requiring that streets and sidewalks not be blocked. Thanks. Okay, and next is Therese. Sorry if I didn't say that properly.
Hi, no, that's it. It's Therese. Thank you. I live on Hillcrest, and I'm also pleased that you're not going to be putting in sidewalks. I think sometimes that maybe the potholes slow people down. And although we're not a completely through street, I'm a pedestrian 99% of the time. I do occasionally see people going really fast on that street, and I would like for it not to look like a raceway. And so my question is it still the case that you're going to be considering some elements for traffic calming, like painted lines or a raised crosswalk at the beginning of the street, maybe where Hillcrest meets Bridge, just so that we give some indication of slowing cars down? Is that something that you're still going to be considering, or is that done after the fact, after the milling and repaving process?
It can be both. So it can be that as we're developing the plans and we continue to develop the plans, we may say, okay, it makes sense to stripe here, or it makes sense to tighten up this turning radius. That's something we pay very close attention to. But it is also sometimes the case where we pave a street. An example of this is Meadow Street, actually. And Hillary can speak to this. She certainly come to many of these meetings. But we pave the street and then we say, okay, you know what, we really need to double back here and can do something, because we've collected data that suggests that we have to do that. But in general, we try to be preemptive around this, and to the extent that we can do something when it's under construction, we like to try to do that. Next is Louise and Alan. Go ahead.
Hi, we live on Hillcrest Drive and we've been here for 43 years and we love it with no sidewalks. We've never had any problems with pedestrians or cars or bicyclists. And we're very pleased that you're not putting in sidewalks here. You know, it's a beautiful street, well landscaped by all the participants on the street. We take excellent care of our yards, and to put in more trees on our street, we really don't need it because we take care of the greenery that we have here. So we're very pleased that there's no sidewalks at all. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your comments. So I don't see anyone else from the public. Is there anyone from the commission who has any more questions or comments on this presentation? Councilor Jarrett?
Thank you. Getting back to the plans and the timing of when this is brought forward, I would appreciate in the next cycle if there was a general discussion, maybe at the November TPC, with just the list of potential streets. They're not necessarily decided upon. We don't know exactly which right of way, which exceptions we'd be asking for. I mean, maybe we'll have a new ordinance by then too for complete streets, which could make it easier. But to have that discussion a little bit in advance, where there wouldn't be any decisions made, but we would have a sense of possibilities and give some feedback. And then when it comes to a meeting, in January, we'll have a little more time to have thought about it and to have given feedback. So that's my request. And then I would just second Alex Bowman's suggestions to really think about incorporating traffic calming into these projects. Traffic calming is something I hear from constituents from all over the city, but that it's important, and there's a great desire for it, and this is the time to do it when we're already tearing up the street. So I encourage you to keep looking for those and if there are funds available, consider it a high priority to put that in there.
Thank you, Councilor. Okay, any other comments from commissioners? Okay, I see one hand, Fidela. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's actually Ronald. Two questions. Have you coordinated with the gas company about their plans to replace many gas lines that are leaking or aged, according to state law? And will this cause problems in going through the street twice, opening up the street twice? In general, not specific street, but just in general.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we have a really good relationship with Eversource, and we're in pretty frequent communication with them. So they are aware of our plans. Many of the, some of these streets have their infrastructure, some of them do not. But we want to avoid a scenario where we're digging up and they're digging up. So the answer is yes, we always coordinate with Eversource. Okay, any other comments from the public or comments from the commission on the presentation? Okay, Ronald, I see your hand up one more time. Go ahead.
Follow-up question. Is there any danger to underground utilities? You said 3 inches of milling. Some of the streets have lines that are unknown depth. Is that an issue? Is there any concern about going into? I know you do mark out all the lines, but some of them have electric lines underground too.
Yep. So in general, a mill is not disruptive to underground utilities. Our water mains, sewer mains are typically greater than 5 feet. You know, privately owned electric is not something that we can control or mark out. So if there's some, you know, unauthorized installation in the public right of way, we'll certainly find it. But in general, a mill is the least disruptive treatment to do to a roadway and has no impact on buried utilities. Okay, any other comments from the commission or the public? So what I propose, or what I would propose, is that per the ordinance, we do need to ask this commission to vote to allow for these design exceptions as presented in the PDF document on the screen. So I would ask if there's a motion for a positive approval for these exceptions for all roads as presented. Anyone want to make that motion?
I'd like to make a positive approval for these roads.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Clemmer. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay, that's Chief Cartledge as a second. Okay, is there any further discussion from the commission on this? Okay, hearing none. Beth, please call the roll.
Donna,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Carolyn,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Deborah,
Yes.
Diana,
Yes.
Jamie.
Yes.
It's unanimous with 7.
Okay, thank you. Is there any new business? Okay, hearing none, may I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Councilor Clemmer with a second by Councilor Jarrett. Is there any discussion? Okay, Beth, please call the roll for us.
Donna,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Carolyn,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Deborah,
Yes.
Diana,
Yes.
and Jamie.
Yes.
Unanimous with 7.
Okay, thanks everyone for your time and attention. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you next month. Take care.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.